So that takes us to the crown of a sleeve, which is far more extreme. And this, you can see that this is going like this. Now, why is it doing that? Why do we need to do that on a sleeve? Yeah, but why do we need so much drawn in on the crown? Like, what would that do? Bearing in mind what we've just talked about. Yeah, but why? Why does it need to do that? What's going on with the curves of the body there? What's that? Not quite, although it helps. But that's not the principal reason. Why? Well, you could put more under here to compensate for that. Yeah, I think we're basically there. It's this part of the arm here, right? The sort of muscly part of the arm that really sticks out and protrudes. We don't really want to sort of to have a shoulder that's kind of sticking out to the point that you could then have a sleeve going straight off it, because it would be odd. It would be hanging out like this in order to clear this part of the arm. So in effect, what we do instead is our seam is sitting here, and we need to clear all of that. So in the same way that we're having to go around this part of the shoulder, we're having to do it here on the arm instead. And you need a lot more and a lot more quickly to generate that, because all of this is coming up, and then it's capping and having to go back into quite a small curve in an armhole by comparison. So you're really close, but it's looking at the curve of the arm. So in any tailored garment, that will exist. And you can see there's much more in there than even visually you think there is. There's generally about 4 to 5 centimeters in there. So if you imagine 4 to 5 centimeters of fabric, there's a lot. That's how you're generating that, doing that. Okay. Now again, because this is wool, it's very, very easy to do. But if you were dealing with a cotton, or you were dealing with a nylon, you're dealing with something that you can't shrink in very easily, you will see it much more graphically. It will be far less happy to actually do what you're asking it to do. So chances are it will be a bit wrinkly. It will have got a bit distressed along the top surface of the ease that's kind of sticking out. It won't just smoothly meld in like that. But even then you can see what's happening. I mean, you can see there's a huge amount of ease in there. So this is something that you need to compensate for as well when you're tracing off this pattern. And the degree at which this curves out and the amount of sleeve roll that they've put in there to create that roundness will to some degree dictate just how much you have in there. Now, classic tailoring, that would be about 4 to 4.5 centimeters maybe. Sometimes 5, sometimes even more. If we're talking about a tailored jacket where the arms are really down like this and the pitch of the crown is very steep, so it's coming really up, the whole thing is super sharp, so that as you start to do this, you very quickly start to get a kink in the sleeve. That will have more in the crown, and the crown will be higher to compensate. Whereas if it's softer tailoring and it's more at about this point that the pitch is set, so you've got more ease at the bottom here, it means you've got less height on the crown at the top, which means chances are you'll have less ease as well. Because the more relaxed it becomes as a cut, and the further up the pitch of the sleeve becomes, and you'll very easily be able to see this by putting a jacket on the stand and just swinging the sleeve until you can see where it starts to kink there and it starts to become tight underneath. Let me just show you on this. Yeah.
The 4 to 5 cm we talked about, is
Yeah.
it in the ease, like in the curve, or is it in the cap height?
It's right, it's all at the top. It's from about there to about there.
Okay.
Sometimes they put a little bit in there, and it's best not to put any there. But it starts here and it becomes more and more dramatic to the crown and then drops away very quickly there. So you're talking 4 to 5 centimeters just there. That's how much you need to do that.
So if we measure the armhole, then we add
Yeah, and I mean, in a lot of ways, have we got a men's? Let's put it up. Actually, it doesn't really matter. Actually, it's far too small for this. But at the point at which the bottom here becomes tense, actually, let's put it on a smaller mannequin and then I can do it up. Might be better. What's the smallest one we've got? Yeah, that one. So, I mean, this is relatively tailored because you can see that we're only really getting this far out before, do you see at that point there, we can see that already this is kinking. So it's cut almost so that crown goes to the full height of this armhole, almost, when it's down. Now, the more relaxed tailoring becomes, the higher I would be able to pull this before that's happening. And that will dictate quite dramatically how much is in there. There'll be less in there because there'll be less height and there'll be less need for this to suddenly come out and drop straight down. Does that all make sense? So this is a really good way, straight away, of you identifying just how much ease is likely to be in there to begin with, which already gives you a head start with what we're about to do.
Just the ease we need for the shoulder.
Say again?
For the shoulder, you said that we need ease if it's not a dark.
In here, yeah, it's generally 5 to 7. You could even go up to a centimetre. If you were actually making this for someone that's a bit like that, you would probably need a centimetre in there. Yeah. Okay, so let's just quickly have a look, because I'd like to get through quite a lot before we run out of time. I'm not going to do this accurately, but I'm just going to run through the key points that you need to know. But I think what we've covered on that front panel basically applies to just about everything in any garment. It's always the same principle. You're looking for a grain, you're looking to get areas flat that you can. You're then looking to identify where there's ease. You can look at this in dresses and shirts and skirts, jackets. It doesn't really matter. They're pretty much always the same rules. Where something, this is a very good example of not being able to see, again, the whole panel flat, which of course gives us a whole series of problems because we think, well, there's the seam there, but here's the seam here, so how are we going to work that one out? Because it's not, you can't get to both seams at the same time, and you can't even see both of them at the same time. And it is almost 100% of the time it will happen in a sleeve unless it's cut a little bit unusually. You're generally not going to be able to see the top sleeve front and back. So, I'm going to do this very quickly and very inaccurately, but it will just give you the points that you're going to need to follow. Right, first things first. I've pinned this seam down. This has a lot of padding in there, so it's actually very difficult for us to feel our way right through it. So to some degree, we're just going to have to use a little bit of experimenting with ways to actually get the information through. And the way I would be most likely to do it is with a pin, because it's the finest thing and the longest thing. So we can get it right through a lot of layers of fabric. And that way we can very quickly get those points down. But because we can't really pin that down, we're going to have to leave that. And once we get to it, we'll make sure that we're quite accurate with not allowing it to move too much as we go. But what we can do at the moment is we can identify where the fold in the seam is, fold in the sleeve is. And another thing that is very useful to do is to actually put a reference pin running the other way. maybe just in the middle is enough. So
Pinned along the crease when you've
you got it, exactly. So we trace through that first line that we need. Next thing, really trying to control this as much as possible. And this is where we're really going to have to clean it up at the end. But we really want to try and get as much of that information through as we can. So we could start off there, and we could probably pin this one because we're quite close to the paper on the edge. We can pin it through like that. So at least we've got that one. And we know where that point of entry of the pin goes in. We know that's our first point. I'd advise actually that you pin along this crease as well, at least at this point. Could pin it actually there too. And then it just simply gets too thick here. So we can see that it's coming up to here. And we need to put one through there. But you can see what we're getting here, we can see that there's far more fabric than we're actually able to record, because it's quite simply doing that. So what we're recording at the moment is the starting point that we will actually then need to rectify once we measure this from the other reference points that we have. It's just the starting point of our curve. And then very important to mark this, and then very important, and be careful not to mark the garment, to mark down this folded edge here. There's those. Then we can take this out. Obviously you'll do this far more accurately and carefully than me. Leave all of these ones in that run along the fold, and don't take that one out that I just took out. And you'll just be able to see the points that we marked there. And then what we need to do is fill in the rest. So we put this one onto that line. How are we doing for time? 5. Oh, it's 4 o'clock. Oh, 4 o'clock.
What do you do with the fold line if it sort of curves inwards because of the ease?
And it will. Yeah, that's exactly a problem that we have. What you do is, to that point at which it then starts to curve in, you pin it, and then you just have to let it go. So you can actually already very clearly see that there's a massive chunk missing there, and that's already a very good start to us working out just how much ease is in the top of that crown. So as this is pinned, if you, rather than just trying to pull that, you see, as soon as I try and pull that to the line, as you quite rightly pointed out, it's going to be doing this. So clearly that's not really where the fabric should be lying, creating that crease. Instead, that should be really nice and flat, so that all of this here just lies flat. And again, if you want to take some time to really do this with care, you can also identify a grain line, and you can have drawn your grain line through in the first half, and then when you fold it this way, you can redraw your grain line again. You can even draw it there, and then you can draw it again up there. And all of these points give you more reference points, so that as you go, you can check, oh, it's bent there, and it's bent there, and so on, and it gives you some really clear clues as to what needs to be straightened up. sleeves are quite difficult to do, and quite often you're going to end up with something that's, again, not 100%. So you need to then start to measure it, and as we said before, you need to fill in the gaps, and so don't be disheartened if it comes out not quite perfect the first few times you try it. Okay. So, this is actually a slightly unusual garment, because normally we would expect this to curve with the arm, because your arm is a slight banana shape. So generally this seam, what it's doing is actually helping follow the contour of the arm, and it's usually set just on the inside of that curve. So you're quite close to the curve, and it is actually quite effortless for you to be able to get that lovely curve of the sleeve in. This garment is quite a good example of how that hasn't really, in this particular case, been followed as a rule, and they've actually thrown the seam further back, and they've changed the curve of it. You can actually see, if you look at it, that whilst it's still creating the shape here, it's actually, this panel is curving that way. Normally this would look very straight, so you wouldn't have that curve going like that. And we can see that in actual fact, if we really follow the dots here, you can see it's kind of doing that. You see, so first I drew straight, so you can see now I've kind of drawn the actual curve that they've done, which is curving out that way. So then when you go and trace this one, you can see that's going to have a more extreme curve to compensate. So that one is going to be hitting back more than it ordinarily would. That one also would be not straight, but nowhere near as extreme as it is there. And
Is the one we haven't traced off yet more extreme to compensate for that one straighter?
it's just however much more this one's going in that direction, this one will be compensating by the curve also going that way. So say a curve was normally there, it will instead now be going in more like that. So basically all you're doing is you've swung that seam to the back more, and that's why this is a bit of a funny shape. Again, at the end, if you just use a tape measure, look at grain lines, you can start to sort of identify things that are right and wrong with it. But this is essentially what we've got now. So you can see at the moment that that's unusually steep, really a little bit too steep, I would say, for a curve, because you would just have a really big point. So, and also the other thing is already we can see that that's pretty much 5 centimeters of ease already. Now, the next thing we can go back and have a look at is, oh yeah, there's quite a lot curving this way as well. So when we've traced that off, see we've missed all of that, which is a good 5 millimeters at least, that then drifts out to nothing down here. and it will be the same at the back. So bearing that in mind, I mean, I've drawn it out a little bit. I think it should really come out even slightly further than that. And because at this point you can see there's more there as well, it probably hasn't dropped quite down to the extent that it appears when we've marked that point in. So again, we can use some sort of analysis of actually how much more there probably is that's disappearing in there a little bit, we can see. As I say, it's not a perfect science, and really all you can do is cross-reference it as best you can. That grain line, this whole mixture of things, and then ultimately you need to trial it and just see what is and isn't working.
For the bits that you mentioned we'd missed because of the curve, how do you add them onto the pattern? Like, you know, you're like 5 mil.
Yeah, I'm just doing it now. So say let's add another 5 mil there, and we know that it sort of goes up to nothing there. And I mean, I can see that that curve is really odd at the moment, and then it needs some more there. And that will also mean that this is not quite so extreme in the way that it is now. Because at the moment, this is really going up to a point. It is a very steep crown anyway. That's sort of the way they've cut it. But I think it's more steep than even it needs to be. Now the next thing is, we can look also at the length of this from that topmost point down to the bottom. And to the best that we can try and sort of measure that down. So getting right from that point that's 51.2. Now in actual fact, where that folded was not right on that line anyway. So if we follow where it folded up, so there's our fold line running up to here. That would be the best possible place for us to measure from. So again, we measure to compensate how much this fabric, and because we've got so much foam underneath, it's really quite easy to do. We can run that straight down. Yeah, we're sort of pretty much right at 51. Should be a whole lot more. Sorry, 52. So you can see that this is distorted a bit here as well. So if we run roughly from 52, that's where it should be. So we lose a little bit of the funny lump there. We add that 5 mil in that we talked about here. We add a little bit more into there, just to compensate for the roundness all the way around. And that's the curve that we end up with there, which is a far more familiar sleeve curve, even though it's quite steep on the crown. All right? That can also, exactly the same principle can be followed as you do this one here. All right? Again, one thing that I should have told you also is that you should always put balance points. So when you trace that off, you should also have a marker there that you then mark. That you then mark exactly on this one, and then when you do the next one, don't take this out. So this gives you your balance point for the front and the back sleeve, undersleeve and top sleeve. Is that all clear? Have I lost anybody at any point, or is that okay still? Yeah.
Like this bit here, curve wouldn't hold it alone.
Mhm.
Is that the ease? Or?
It is, yeah.
Okay. So that's another way to figure out how much
So-
ease there is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it sort of did the work for us, really, because when we laid this down, we can we can see that it was wanting to lie flat to a certain point, which is about to here, and then you can see, and then it just peels off. So all of this is straight, and then suddenly, whoop,
Mm-hmm.
and that is simply because it's all been eased in. So yeah, that, and then of course the same principle here, where we could see it was flat to a point, and remember we were saying, don't try and straighten it, just let it go where it wants to go within reason, check your grain line, but essentially just let it lie where it's going to lie, and that gives you this other curve. So in the end, we're roughly in the world of 5 centimeters.